Hi, I'm Rick Albert, and welcome to The Key to the City of Angels, the podcast where we unlock the secrets of Los Angeles real estate. With over 300 real estate deals under my belt, I've seen it all, from house hacking strategies that build wealth to helping clients close multi-million-dollar deals in one of the most competitive markets in the world. Every week, I'll bring you expert insights, market trends, and inspiring success stories to help you navigate the LA real estate scene. Whether you're a first-time buyer, an investor, or just curious about what it takes to thrive in the City of Angels, this podcast is your guide to making smarter decisions and achieving your goals. So grab your keys. It's time to unlock your path to prosperity in Los Angeles real estate. Hello, everyone. Rick Albert here with another great episode of The Key to the City of Angels. Today I have Mark Gomez of Gomez Law. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rick. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this will be fun because we're going to talk a lot about different aspects from a legal perspective, but specifically to here in LA because there's lawsuits that happen all the time. So, Mark, how did you get into this space to begin with?
Yeah, so pretty interesting. I became a lawyer right after the foreclosure meltdown, right? The mortgage meltdown in 2008. And that led to a wave of foreclosure lawsuits against banks. Banks weren't really keeping to their promises or even having things organized, so knowing what the right hand was doing compared to the left. And so there was a big opportunity for new laws to go ahead and be used to sue banks and hold them to loan modification agreements and to terms that were promised. And so I started off with that. And it was also interesting kind of working on some of those cases where you saw fraud and mortgage applications being forged signatures or saying that they made more income than they did. So not as prevalent today, but also still something to just be wary of, right? If you're not a seasoned real estate investor, you got to watch what that mortgage application says and what you're agreeing to.
Yeah, it was because one of my first jobs was buying foreclosures of the courthouse steps. So I
Yeah.
remember going through, and there still be occupants in the property. We're going to sue you and sue this and sue that. And I'm just like a low-level guy with the
Yeah.
developer. I don't know what's going on, but but then we just talk. It's like, look, as a buyer, we're protected just by
Yeah.
virtue because we had nothing to do with the foreclosure. But it was
Exactly.
always easier to name as many people in the lawsuit as possible
Yeah.
in the hopes that something sticks.
Yeah, we would go ahead and include the investors that bought the properties just so that they had notice of what was going on,
That's
right?
fair.
And say, okay, because there would be maybe an eviction that the investor would start and initiate. And
Mm.
so we would have to go and be like, hold on, we got to consolidate or stay that eviction pending the outcome of this wrongful foreclosure, right, allegation that we have. And it was hard to go, it's hard to reverse a foreclosure.
Yeah,
It's
I can
probably even
imagine.
harder now, but then we were successful here and there. Most of the time, you just ended up getting some monetary settlement from the bank if they did go and do something wrong. So,
Yeah, I remember once I was sitting in a room because we had to do mediation first. And so the developer I worked with, they sent me as like the representative. I'm like, okay. They're like, just sit there. Do we already have an attorney? But there'd be like 10 of us in this room
yeah,
against one attorney
yeah,
on the other side. It was just wild to see everyone have conversations. They don't have an argument because of this, or there's an argument because of that. But you're right, there were people. And I always said this, is like there were people who were foreclosed on when they shouldn't have been. There was a lot of cases of people just being down on their luck. It was a rough time for people.
yeah, yeah. It was really wild, everything that was going on.
Yeah.
Kamala, she ended up helping to push the Homeowners Bill of Rights, which went into effect in 2013. So that helped add some clarity and some protections for homeowners that were going through this loan modification process. But yeah, there was a lot. And for sure, as an investor, if you didn't know the rules of what the rights for the former homeowners were, you could be walking into a big headache. And even today, right, there's still some limitations. And so we do have a foreclosure attorney that handles that kind of stuff. But yeah, not as prevalent. So
Yeah.
as long as you have an attorney that's, has a background in California foreclosure law, it's good to just, if you're going to be buying foreclosure properties, check in on what all your options are for sure.
No, for sure. So what is prevalent today? What are you seeing? And I guess we should also preface by this is all general talk. You're not giving specific legal advice, all that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Thank you.
I
Appreciate
always
that.
try to remember that. Yeah, so what is prevalent? What's going on today right now?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, unfortunately, with the fires, that was a question
Hmm.
that people were asking me, okay, how is this going to affect what you do and with the real estate prices? And yeah, I think there's just going to be constant demand for property in Los Angeles. And with
Sure.
fires, that's only going to go and push things up. With, I mean, with the immigration issues that we're living through right now, that's going to further go ahead and impact construction cost. And I don't see prices going down. If you are able to buy a fixer-upper, it's probably, and you have a crew, you have a team that you can count on to go and do those rehabs, it's probably a good opportunity to keep moving along in that direction. But yeah, and a lot of people are keeping up with keeping their loan interest rates, their low interest rates that they have. So we have this kind of stalemate still that's going on. I have my properties, right, with low interest rates that I'm like, yeah, I'm not selling that anytime soon. Yeah, I think that's just where everyone is. And then we have on top of that the new rules with the who's paying the buyers real estate fees, agent fees. And so that's interesting. Is that going to slow things down? Maybe a little bit. But it for me, it just comes back to if you're a buyer or a seller, you got to pay attention to the what you're signing, what you're agreeing to. If you're not sophisticated, then really reach out to have a really good real estate agent. Hopefully, that's step one.
Yeah.
Hope find someone that really has your interest, your best interests, has done a ton of deals and can advise you what additional negotiating clauses to include, what to watch out for. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of changes and you just got to be more on your toes and not just sign things that you're not really sure what they are.
It's with the buyer broker agreements, I love them. It's helped me tremendously just by virtue of there'd be times when I've shown clients around. Because so in other states, it's very common to sign those agreements. In California, it just wasn't.
Yeah, yeah,
So there were times when I'm showing clients around, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh yeah, I already bought something."
yeah.
I'm like, "What?"
Say what again?
Yeah, I was like, "But I just wasted my time."
Yeah,
Just if someone works with an attorney, they sign an initial agreement. It's common. Like it makes sense logically,
yeah,
as long as the real estate agent can provide value. So far, at least in my experience, sellers have still been paying.
yeah.
That has not been an issue. None of my clients have pushed back on it. I'm like, how do you expect them to have a down payment and closing cost? It's
Well,
factored into
yeah.
the price.
Yeah, I've heard it's using people are trying to use it now as a negotiating chip, but it's going to be paid by the seller.
Yeah, I did one recently where we were negotiating, part of it was the commissions.
Yeah,
And I was like, there's value in me bringing you a cash buyer at list price. There's value there. And the agent's like, yeah, that's true. I'm like, yeah. And I'm not asking for anything. It's like typically people pay between I've seen 3%. It's rare, but between 2 to 3%. Yeah, 2.5, right down the middle. It's like, there we go. Just take
yeah,
it and move on. And everyone was happy. It was a super clean escrow. So
yeah.
hasn't really, at
Very
least in
good.
my world, it hasn't been an issue. Only once did a seller not want to pay a high enough commission. So
Yeah,
my buyer, because it was cash, he paid the difference, but it was factored into the price. So either
yeah,
way, the seller paid it.
yeah. And then I guess I have an interesting question from your perspective. What do you think about? I know there was one concern that this would drive down how much commission real estate brokers were going to get paid, and so you haven't seen that, and you don't think
Not
that's
really,
going to
no.
happen. Yeah.
No, it's one of those where, and I actually use this as a great example. So before this law went into effect, there was a lot of agents that were posting that they're only going to pay 1%,
Mhm.
1.5%. And I remember I actually did one at the 1.5%, and it had sat on the market. And so my client, we wrote an offer on it. They came back at a higher number. My client was willing to pay it, but I said, no, I wouldn't. Hold off. They'll come
Mm,
back. Next thing you know, they came back weeks later with only 5 grand more. It was a condo, but it's, yeah, people want to get paid, and the buyers don't have enough money, and they understand the value of a strong agent. I don't necessarily see too much suppression there. It will be interesting to see it on the new construction side
mm,
because if you're a builder, you're like, "Ooh," it's such a straightforward transaction.
yeah.
It's like,
The value
do
here. Yeah.
yeah, it's like there's nothing to inspect. The house is brand new, which we
Yeah.
all know there could be issues, but still, it's like appraisal. Here's all our other 100 homes that have sold.
Yeah.
Use our lender, use our insurance. It could be straightforward. So in the new construction world, it will be interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. But what on the legal side, whether it's mistakes that you've been seeing, anything like that on the buying and selling?
The biggest thing, we actually had a case about this, pretty recent and relevant in the litigation format, but our client bought a property with a big old outdoor barbecue and overhang. What do they call it?
Like a pergola or something like
Something
that?
like that,
Yeah.
yeah. But it wasn't up to code. It wasn't fire retardant or anything. It was too close to the wall. So that she's been required by the city to go ahead and take it down. And then the
Hmm.
back unit, the dual agent. So that's another thing. I was like, don't do a dual agent, especially as a new buyer. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But the dual agent was selling hard on, hey, look at this is an amazing backyard with this great barbecue. You're going to have great parties. And this back unit, this bonus room, you could rent it out and get cash flow. There was
Hmm.
a kitchen and a bathroom. And so you probably know where this story is going. None of that's perfect.
Yep.
She buys the property. She thinks she's getting a great deal. And she puts in a tenant who is actually like a friend, a family friend of hers, and the tenant stops paying the rent and then actually contacts the city saying complaining
Hmm.
about issues with the unit, and then the city's, yeah, that's not, you're not permitted for to go and rent that out as a separate unit. So that tenant stopped paying. She had to pay her a large cash amount to just leave. And so this whole thing has cost her a lot of out-of-pocket money. She's being required by the city to get rid of the kitchen, the bathroom in that bonus room.
Hmm.
And she's just very upset with what she thought was going to be an income producing primary residence and this great outdoor entertainment area. And but what ended up happening here is the FHA appraisal came in at the same price that she bought the property for. So the sellers are like, what are your damages, right? You paid for a property that when the FHA appraisal was done, it didn't include the extra bonus room as living footage, square footage. It didn't include the barbecue or any of that. The FHA appraiser said, hey, the main house that is worth 480, and that's what we're going to do your appraisal at 480. So now the
Hmm.
sellers were like, you have no damages, right? You didn't pay more for these other things. And unfortunately, we did settle the case, and but the client got a lot less than she thought she was going to get from this
Hmm.
situation, from having to go through filing a lawsuit and go through this whole mess. Yeah, it's basically buyers don't rely on just your agent, don't rely on a dual agent, and do your inspections. Unfortunately, you got to be very hands-on with what is permitted. Ask those questions, maybe get that in writing. What exactly is permitted? The sellers had paid about $30,000 for this outdoor barbecue setup. And yeah, they didn't ask for it to be permitted. There was no guarantee from the contractor that built it out. Unfortunately, that's to the buyer to verify everything.
My next
Cliche,
question.
but a first-time buyer, oh, I'm going to bring my dad, and the dad start kicking everything and testing. Oh, these walls don't look standard. The structure here is a little off. And it's, yeah, you have to go in there and take and second guess everything. And maybe even some general advice might be just expect save some extra monies, your rainy day fund when buying a new property for surprises, unfortunately.
Yeah, because I'm assuming this property was in California.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a couple of things that popped to mind because I'm thinking, like, are you familiar with Zemus? Yeah. So for those who don't know, Zemus is like a phenomenal website for how archaic it looks for the city of LA, but you can pull permit history from I think 1996 to now, which is like generally like pretty good. Anything
Yeah.
before that, it's like Wild West. But yeah, I can't tell you how many properties I've been through where they're like, oh, it's an ADU, it's an accessory dwelling unit. And I'm like, there's no permits for it.
Yeah. You're like, it's not.
Yeah, it's not. And I can't legally rent this.
Yeah.
And then you have this whole barbecue situation. It's like it was always based off the seller's knowledge. The seller may not know what's to code and what's required of permits. It's kind of like when you're a seller, ignorance is bliss. And then buyers, it's like the complete opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would just because these sellers got into this lawsuit and there were damages and there is
Sure.
an attorney's fees clause that we were arguing for. And the mediator in this was 50-50 on whether the attorney's fees clause would kick in under these facts. So that weighed in. But as a sellers, it's dang, they walked into this lawsuit. They had to pay all this money for their attorney. And
Right.
and their attorney was just filing everything under the sun. I was like, wow, I don't know what's going on here. We had to threaten him a few times to stop being frivolous with his filings. But yeah, so they spent a lot of money on their attorney and then had to pitch in for the settlement. It's just, had they known, hey, take it as it is, maybe given a little bit more communication, then my client, the buyer, would have been less surprised. The whole thing, you don't want to surprise a buyer with anything because then they're going to go ahead and figure out a way, if possible, to go after you for those damages.
So where do you draw the line though between, 'cause what if the seller didn't know about the ADU laws, didn't know about all of that? So where do you draw the line between the seller should have known versus the buyer doing their due diligence? Because I can make the strong argument that the buyer should have checked
Yeah,
and they didn't,
yeah,
and that's on them. I literally have one in escrow right now on a townhouse, and I pulled the permit history and there's an open permit. Now the seller's taking care of it.
yeah. Yeah, it's tough for that situation. I would have said at least for the barbecue outdoor area, if you can, if you're a seller, yeah, figure out, is this up to code? Because selling the property and now the buyer has to go ahead and pay for the tear down, right? Maybe the buyer isn't entitled to the replacement value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this wasn't incorporated into the appraisal, but the tear down, the out-of-pocket expenses, right? A city coming in saying, no, these things are not up to code, therefore they need to be taken down, thrown out. Those are going to be hard out-of-pocket expenses
Sure.
that will be supportive for a lawsuit by the buyer.
Yeah.
Don't have things that are out of code.
Yeah. Or if disclose it.
Yeah, yeah. And just as long as you put in the contract and disclose it, that hey, actually, unfortunately, these things are not up to code, and you're buying it as is. You
Right.
know that you're going to have to do something with that bonus room to bring it up to code. Great, no lawsuit.
Right. It's because you knew going into it. It's more of you go into a property, you close, the buyer had no, or sorry, the seller had knowledge and didn't disclose.
Yeah.
That's where the
Yeah.
issue really kind of goes into play. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I think that's where it kind of gets tricky because, like you said, as a seller, it's almost like ignorance is bliss, but to a
Right.
degree. Yeah. To a degree where I think just to be safe, yeah, it is safe to go ahead and just disclose everything, and do your own
Sure.
kind of investigation, reasonable investigation and knowledge of
Right.
the property. We're generally not going to go ahead and advise people to go after sellers for roof issues if the roof was noted in the inspection report of, hey, this could be an old roof. I recommend getting a roofing expert and you didn't, then that's what it is. You
Yeah.
bought it almost as is, knowing that the inspection report highlighted that issue or a foundational issue. Same thing. Foundational issues can be very expensive.
Mm.
So those are tricky. But yeah, you want to advise, that they double check that report and get any other inspections that the initial inspector is recommending.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. And then have you ever seen it where I've only done this once, and I will explain why, where a buyer bought a property without doing inspections. The only reason why was the seller already had inspections from the previous escrow, and it was literally all the same inspectors I use. So outside of that, where's kind of the line drawn then from a litigation standpoint? If I'm a buyer and I come and say, no, I just waived, especially like 2021, for example, where it was
Yeah,
wild. It's, hey, I waived my inspection contingency. So then
yeah.
does it just go to I have to prove that the seller had knowledge and didn't disclose
Yeah,
it?
exactly. So that's the big one, right? Proving that the seller had
Right.
knowledge. How do you do that? We've had some cases where the argument was related to rain issues or something. They put in a new back cement and now it's building up water and causing water damage to a structure. And they say, okay, yeah, we had no knowledge, but they did the repair or the renovation 5 years ago and it's obviously rained since then. And so, as an attorney, you just point to the heaviest days of rain and be like, okay, those you were an owner, right? You lived at the residence on these during these days. It's more, you don't have to, it's circumstantial kind of evidence. You're not going to have anything direct, but that's most of these cases settle. The mediator is going to go ahead and tell you what they recommend. And yeah, it's as a buyer, it's hard to prove
Yeah.
knowledge and do your due diligence for sure.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit to co-ownership. I try to be active in like different forums and stuff, mostly geared towards real estate investing, and
Mm.
it keeps popping up about partnerships.
Yeah.
And I think part of it's just because home prices, investment properties have just gotten so much more expensive that people are starting to partner up. And also, I have a business partner for a few of my properties. And the way we looked at it was more like de-risking. So it's, hey, look, if it's we actually do a $10,000 deductible on insurance, okay, that's 5 grand each. That does that. What problems have you been seeing with some of these partnerships?
Yeah, so we do a lot of partitions. So those are going to be your disputes with between co-owners. Now, most of the common fact scenario is going to be family or friends or boyfriend and girlfriend. It's usually not sophisticated investors, and so you get a whole range of other issues because these people are usually living in the property. And so
Hmm.
there's ouster issues, who's responsible for the utilities. And again, generic advice is what are we agreeing to? Who's responsible for what? Let's go ahead and get this in writing. Sometimes people get into this where, hey, you just need my credit and maybe you need some help with the down payment, but you're going to be the one managing the property. You're going to be living in
Hmm.
one of the units and it's a duplex, right? Some kind of, it's not exactly 50-50 in responsibility and investment. So, what does that look like? And are you getting what you expect out of this partnership situation, right?
Yeah.
But even if it's super generic, yeah, 50-50, we're both splitting everything, just put it in writing and start asking those questions. Who's going to manage this? Who's going to collect the rent? Who's going to pay the utilities? So at least it adds less friction in that arrangement, business arrangement. But yeah, I see one, I guess in between the boyfriend and girlfriend, the non-married couples, right, buying a property together, living there and they break up, and then what happens? So a common misunderstanding that I see is one person will go ahead and live there, and the other person will move out, and now it's totally unclear. One party thinks one thing, the other person thinks another thing
Hmm.
on who's responsible for the mortgage, and what does that mean when we sell? Do I get credit for paying all the mortgage? Or do I not get credit? And one interesting question was, okay, so my boyfriend moved out 3 years ago. I've been paying the mortgage for 3 years and living here. So I should be entitled to all of the equity appreciation since then. And I was like, no, that's not how it's going to work out at
No,
all.
no, I could have
You're
told you
even shaking
that.
your head on that. Yeah. Yeah, they were shocked. They were really shocked at that realization. And I get it because they're like, I'm the one that has been paying all the expenses, right? Without me paying this money in, which was a very high mortgage, right? Paying taxes, insurance, everything. Without me, there would be no home here with no equity. So, you know what? And they're going to benefit equally from all that equity. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, it's a bad return on investment if you're thinking about it. You gave them a 0% interest-free loan because you don't get interest on that. You just
Right.
get your money back for what you put into it. Same thing with repairs or renovations that you did yourself or with your friends and family. If you guys are really good, handy persons, and you built out you upgraded a bonus room or something to look really nice and add more value, you're not going to go ahead and get reimbursements for what a contractor would have charged to do that
Hmm.
work. You're just going to get your reimbursements for your Home Depot receipts. That's it.
I know with me and my business partner, I remember we sat down, it was at Yard House where they had happy hour, which was probably the first mistake. But it worked out. Basically, what we ended up doing is we delegated some of the tasks
Yeah, yeah.
and to where, like, for example, my business partner is head of accounting. So when we were like going through some of the accounting, he's like, hey, I know it's more complicated, but do you mind if we do A, B, and C? I said, look, you're in charge of accounting.
Yeah.
If you want it as A, B, and C, we do it as A, B, and C. I don't question it. versus some of the stuff we did on the when we had to buy property, we've actually had to sell a property. It's like I took over that aspect of it because that's my experience. So we just picked and choose. We talked about everything. And then what we also did was because what if there's a dispute, right? To your point, like what if there's a disagreement? So we end up doing it where it's like, look, we're 50-50 owners, 50-50, and just basically everything. But if there's a debate, he has 51%. And we
There you go.
did that because he has way more experience in managing properties and he was actually he's actually one of my biggest clients. So happened to be. So look, you have more experience than me in this world. But if for some reason there's a debate, what you say goes.
Yeah.
And so far it's worked out really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I have the same thing similar. I have a partnership on an Airbnb in Big Bear with my
Hmm.
uncle and so he was in the military and so he's really good at like giving orders and he loves
Right.
handling the handyman and the cleaner and if there's things that gotta getting quotes and negotiating those quotes. Oh, he loves it. That's
He lives for it. Good for
yeah, that's what
him,
he
dude.
lives for. Yeah, he's retired, so he's good. And then my experience was I had previous experience managing Airbnbs and working with the Airbnb platform and the software
Mhm.
that syncs up with it, right? And then having someone like a virtual assistant help manage the day to day. So I was more on what are our SOPs? What's our checklists, right? For making sure that guests are getting good service. And so, yeah, it could be totally beneficial for someone, both parties coming together with their strengths. So I recommend it. And like you said, there's less risk with certain types of investments like Airbnb right now. I think it's totally go big if you can. Don't go small. Don't go
That's what I've
for a
been hearing.
small two bed, two bath where you're going to be renting out for 100, 150 a night. Try to go for a big cabin, right? A big 5 bedroom with lots of amenities because you're going to have more profit opportunities for that. You're not going to get stuck in the high competition, lowest price area.
My understanding with Airbnb is in a lot of markets, Big Bear included, it's very oversaturated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I know from personal experience, we've been having really bad luck with Airbnbs.
Mm.
Like the places are dirty, whatever. We've had some good ones to the point where now we just go back to hotels.
Yeah.
If we have a bad experience in a hotel room, they can move us to another room.
Yeah.
But then you have these bigger properties where like a hotel can't compete.
Yeah.
Like we hosted an
It doesn't
event.
make any sense. If you're going to go
Right.
ahead and go to a fancy hotel, right, the Waldorf or something, and it's going to come out to $700 a night, and you're going with a big group of people, it's okay. Let's just get a really nice Airbnb in that area and go wine tasting or go to San Diego.
I
So
agree.
for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Yeah, like you said, with the oversaturation, I feel like it's a little bit of a rebound.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
the bad hosts aren't going to survive. The people that are really paying attention and keeping things clean and checking in and providing new amenities, yeah, those are the people that are going to be able to stick it out. But it's definitely not the gold rush that it was in 2020.
No, and then a lot of them were forced to sell
Yeah,
because the city started imposing laws against Airbnb. And like, I paid this really high price for this property with the expectation of now the numbers don't make sense, or I just can't rent it out, period. I
yeah.
interviewed someone else for the podcast who specializes in lending for the short-term rental space. And he was saying invest in markets that already have laws around
Yeah,
Airbnb. He's like,
yeah.
that way you already know it's been addressed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I saw another one that said if you can get where there's a maximum number of permits and
There you go.
you get on a wait list or something for that and you can squeeze in. I'm not sure how transferable a lot of these counties or areas are going to be like, oh, I'm going to sell this my home with the license. I think you got to reapply and get back to the end of the line.
Probably.
But if you can squeeze into those areas with limited permits, then yeah, that's a benefit. It's going to avoid the oversaturation. Yeah.
Right. No, very nice. Okay, so you have these business partnerships or whatever, like you, your uncle, me, and my business partner. But then what, oftentimes these become conversations and it doesn't always equate to written agreements. So
Mhm.
where is some of that difference? And like
Mhm.
what, and I know what can you enforce? How do you prove one over the other?
If you have a written agreement, right, the good news is you can negotiate and include everything under the sun, right? The only caveat, and there's probably some gray area on this legally, but straw buyers, right? So if you have bad credit and you're bringing on a partner just for their credit
Mhm.
and you sign the contract and agreement before, like I have one case where allegedly they signed it like a year before buying the property. And
Huh.
it's an illegal contract because it's a straw buyer contract is essentially mortgage fraud. It's you're supposed to be buying a property to be an owner. So if somebody's saying, I'm not going to be an owner, I'm only going to be on the loan and have no ownership rights, then that's a straw buyer contract. And in most of those situations, the person being used for their credit is offered some money, right? $5,000, $10,000 for use of their credit. But outside of that, basically everything else is you can put it into writing, you can negotiate it, and the contracts don't have to be that complicated. But yeah, some of the terms would be like we said, who's going to be responsible for what, and if there's a disagreement, one term that I would definitely include is does either of us get to buy out the other party, and is that going to be at a straight appraisal? That would be what I would recommend, right? So if someone wants to walk away and get bought out, right, they want out, then it just you guys agree on a mutual appraisal, get it appraised, and the person that wants to stay with that investment is given the opportunity to pay that buyout at 50-50 if that's what it is.
Interesting. Let's say you have a buyer or someone who with really bad credit, they bring on a business partner for the purpose of credit. Where and what should people disclose to their prospective business partner? Like, I feel like if I were to work with someone, I'd want to know their credit. Because that is a huge contributing factor. Maybe they have bad credit because they have a habit of not being able to pay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now you're going into business with them.
Yeah. Yeah, you can ask, you could require that as part of your partnership. I'm not sure if you'd be getting a, if that information would be shared with both parties when you're applying for the mortgage. It might be, but yeah, what is your history? And I would include that. Do a background check if you're not really knowledgeable. Unfortunately, maybe you're aware of this too, but there's a lot of, like we said, fraudsters that we have another case where this very hardworking man who's a little bit elderly now had some extra money to invest and was trying to buy some real estate or some land to go ahead and invest in. And the real estate broker that he ended up running into was like, oh, yeah, no, that's great. I can be your business partner too. Let's do this. I'll be your business partner. And eventually they created an LLC, and that business partner moved the property from that LLC to his own LLC. And so just straight real estate fraud, and is now alleging that this other agreement was signed by our client that gave away all of his property interests, which was worth about 500,000 in these lots, in lieu of the broker agreeing to cancel a listing agreement. And I'm like, that doesn't add up at all.
No.
The listing agreement is worth nothing. So why would my client go ahead and give up almost $500,000 of property to cancel a listing agreement? It just doesn't make sense.
So then, if let's say I meet someone, because that's super common, right? People just met someone, they vibe at a networking event. What kind
Mhm.
of questions should they be asking to identify if there might be fraud or anything like that?
You can ask a bunch of questions like, how many deals have you done? I don't know if they'll be offended if you ask, have you ever been sued? Have you ever?
I think it's a legitimate question.
Yeah, yeah. You should ask, hey, do you have any criminal background or anything? Because fraud and is breach of fiduciary duty. When you're a partner in a deal or a partner in an LLC or a company, right, you have fiduciary duties to your partners. So it's very common, unfortunately, for those duties to be breached, which have attorney's fees and damages to it. But it just gives rise to litigation and stuff. So yeah, ask them, have they been sued before? Have they ever had to sue? Have they been foreclosed on? Yeah, what is their kind of credit history? Obviously, what is their income? And how long have they had that? how stable is that income, right?
Yeah. How do you find some of the lawsuit stuff? If because I was waiting on a different, I think it was a Bigger Pockets podcast. They talked about this, where I think it was
Yeah.
one of the hosts who was like, I just canceled an agreement with a potential business partner because he said he'd never been sued. They did research and they found an active lawsuit happening.
Yeah.
So, how do you find some of that? Or is it just as simple as a Google search?
So you can try a Google search, and some of the counties will allow you to go in and search by last name, and then some of it is a paid search that you do. But a lot of this stuff, even like evictions or criminal charges, there's these third-party companies that grab that public information as soon as it's made visible and hold on to it. I don't have anyone to recommend off the top of my head.
Sure.
But yeah, I would say do your research on and maybe do a few companies, a couple companies to do that background search that is going to include civil judgments, civil lawsuits, evictions, and then, of course, credit and background for criminal and foreclosures, evictions. Yeah, and that's a common question I've gotten from lots of people. They're like, oh, I have this eviction. It keeps popping up on my, when I go try to rent a new place, how can I get rid of it? And I'm like, unfortunately, there's no control that the law or anyone else has publicly over these third-party companies. It's their database. If they grab that information, and even if you quash it, even if you go ahead and have that record sealed, you expunge it, it's still going to be on a third-party database. I tell everyone, err on the side of just disclosing everything, because if that background check comes up with these issues, now you look like you're hiding something.
Yeah, when I get tenant applications, it was like honesty is the only policy. Tell
Yeah.
me stuff up front. I had one where for one of my rentals, and he's like, "Hey, just had a bankruptcy. This from the 2008 crash." I'm like, "Okay, it's been like well over a decade." So we ran the credit. The bankruptcy was like the week before. That's very different than whatever that was 15 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Very different. It's not like we're not going to check,
Yeah.
but some people do. So it's is what it is. So, what are some things that are overlooked in contracts in general that you've been seeing, whether partnerships or whatever?
Yeah, I think just in general for contracts is going to be one of my favorites to really consider and advise on is the attorney's fees clause.
Yeah,
Do you want one? Do you want an arbitration clause? What is that? Starting with the attorney's fees clause, with some even landlord lease agreements. I've seen some where it'll be capped. It'll be like, okay, up to $2,000, up to 2,500, because you don't want things to get out of hand where
sure.
you're suing over a $5,000 issue, but now the attorney's fees bill is 50,000. So
It's expensive to be
yeah, yeah. And I've had that discussion with partnership agreements. Let's cap this. Let's
right.
include an attorney's fees clause, but let's cap it to something that is more closer to the value of what our dispute could be about, right? So maybe
Hmm.
it's capped at 25,000 for attorney's fees, right? And so now we're not going to war endlessly. It's just, okay, let's keep it manageable. And then the arbitration clause, I'm not sure if everybody understands what that is, or you can include a mediation clause, which is part of the CAR form. And I think it's very helpful for parties to try to mediate, to try to go ahead and settle your disputes before having to file and go to court. Court's expensive. Um,
Yeah,
I did a few divorce cases years ago, and leading up to trial, the judge would give the same speech to the parties and say, "Listen, if you want to continue litigating this, if you want to continue going to trial, just put a bunch of money in a barrel. Imagine putting a bunch of your money in a barrel and lighting it on fire, because that's what it's
right.
doing if you guys can't reasonably settle these issues."
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, it's like I had heard from multiple attorneys where it's just like, hey, it's expensive to be right. So it's if even if you're in the right, you do have to outweigh those costs. When we bought a property out of state, the seller was supposed to handle things. It was money held back in escrow. He never did it. Now the money's sitting in limbo
Hmm.
because there weren't certain things done. But it's like we spoke to an attorney. We paid the 2,500 bucks for a consultation. He wrote a letter. But he's like, anything beyond that, he's like, you're gonna eat up the 10 grand anyways.
Yeah,
So let it sit in limbo.
yeah,
Let that title company figure out what to do with it once they realize that the agreement was the seller was supposed to do stuff. They didn't do it. And just move on.
yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's the reality. You got pros and cons, cost benefit analysis on
Right.
how much do you want to invest into this. Another term would be time is of the essence. So, like, how much of a requirement is this deadline, right? If we miss the deadline, does that transcend into an immediate, substantial breach of the contract? And so, yeah,
Mhm.
if you want to move things along, include a term like that.
But
Uh,
how do you define that? How do you define, if you say time is of the essence, that could be 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 years.
yeah, so it'd be a hard deadline. So
Okay.
here's the deadline. If you don't meet that deadline, then you've breached the contract unequivocally. So we have a case where, the client was unfortunately late and just being hard-headed about the transaction and submitting, I forget which documents he had to submit in the transaction, but was being hard-headed about it, and they ended up calling it as a breach, enforcing the time is of the essence clause, and you ended up being responsible, liable for a lot in damages and for their attorney's fees. And from his perspective, is I substantially complied, I was on track. But you didn't meet the deadline, and there's that clause. So even if it's 2 days or 3 days, the law is very clear on enforcement of that.
I remember when we had bought a property from the courthouse steps, right? The foreclosures. We were in the process of evicting the occupants. And when we went to court, they didn't file the answer. It's like they didn't meet certain deadlines, and the judge immediately said, sorry, you're out.
Yeah,
You just didn't meet it.
yeah,
They were pissed, but it's just
yeah.
it just is what it is.
Yeah, and that can be up to the judge. That's like total judge discretion unless they file a certain motion in a certain
Hmm.
situation. Generally, judges are very lenient with giving extensions and okay, you're late, but you're here now. Make sure to file your stuff on time moving forward. So that's the good thing that I advise people stick to your deadlines when it comes to litigation. But also, if you miss a deadline, don't just put your head in the sand and be like, it's all
Hmm.
over, and then not talk to an attorney for a year or 2 years later and be like, could I have done something? Say, yeah, you could act a little sooner, six
Right.
months, 3 months after. But yeah, I had another divorce case. Unfortunately, I tried every which way to get my client back into the case, but the
Hmm.
years after, and the judge was like, "Nope, you had your chance, you're out, and everything that you want to argue against on these motions and these requests, you have no voice in this courtroom." And that was really hard for my client to swallow and understand because the things that this other party was requesting, I thought should flatly be dismissed and rejected from the court, but I couldn't say anything.
Right.
The judges, yeah, you might have some great arguments. I can't look at them.
I guess on some ways, like if it's been years and you're a judge, you're trying to get through all these cases, the case workload may be so high anyways. They may just not be able to, even if they wanted to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
So,
realistic reasons for that for sure. Yeah.
so then what if someone's already in a mess? Whether it's the divorce situation, whether it's litigation or whatever, like what's their first legal move?
Yeah. So you definitely need to I tell people, obviously contact an attorney, but have a chronology, have your information ready, have your case number. If you have a case, what is your case number? You'd be surprised at how many calls we get from potential clients. They're like, I have an attorney, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what my case number is. It's get that because you're entitled to that. In California, if you have an attorney, you're entitled to a copy of your file, the
Mhm.
details of your case, which courtroom, who the judge is, what the case number is, upcoming hearing dates. And so, yeah, just have your stuff prepared. And the chronology is what we use in litigation to see what is the strategy, what are your options. Jot that down. Take notes of damages, including emotional distress. If you want to support those kind of damages, you want to have a journal. You want to go ahead and keep a journal of how are you feeling, right? What was said. If your
Mhm.
notes are kept contemporaneously, that helps. That can be used as evidence later. Email yourself, right? These notes to
Right.
like timestamp it. But yeah, it's get a few opinions. There's the old joke of ask the same legal question to five lawyers who get five different answers. It is that is totally 100% accurate. Eventually, how the law works is in some situations, the outcome is obvious. There's one cause of action, there's one right answer. But in other situations, there's multiple arguments that can be made for the same damages for the same breach. And you'll get five different opinions of what arguments should be used, what causes of action to go for. And the judge could end up hypothetically hearing from five different judges on their five different strategies and arguments, could end up at the same result anyways. And I've had some rulings from judges, we win, but I'm like, I don't know how the judge got there because their opinion isn't making sense to me, but I'm
Right.
glad we won. Yeah.
Now, how has like artificial intelligence helped you guys as attorneys? I don't know if you ever heard of Notebook LM.
No, no.
So it's by Google, where it's like ChatGPT, but it's only based on they only search based on the information you give it. So for example, I uploaded all my car forms from
Hmm.
disclosure. So if I have questions like, hey, what disclosure has this and what clause, it pulls from that information. It's funny 'cause I actually sent it to one of my good friends who is an attorney. I'm like, you may be out of a job, right? Because someone can just load up the contract and then search clauses of the contract. But I'm just kind of curious, has any of that stuff been playing a role in your work?
Yeah. Yeah. So in general, I think for most attorneys that want to avoid showing up on the news is the most recent attorney to get caught using ChatGPT for or any AI for citing case law. It's good to be used as a brainstorming tool, right?
Yeah.
Okay, before a potential consultation, I might go ahead and use it to just refresh my memory on an issue so that I'm up to date and hey, what was that? What was the rule on this or that? And just to gather an outline of different arguments that might be used. I think that's where we're at right now. And I know there are some lawyers that are using it more for maybe drafting their first drafts of, say, discovery or pleadings, are uploading maybe some of their former samples to use as examples. Okay, using these examples and using this new argument, and here's the case law that I want you to use, go ahead and draft me the first draft. I'm all for it. I think that's exciting. I don't think it's going to be immediately replacing attorneys for jobs.
Yeah.
The joke for us is, at least for litigators, a judge is not, the judges aren't in a rush to hear arguments from AI, from computers. Judges want to talk to us. They want to hear what our opinions are. And when you're in court, judges love attorneys that can help move things along efficiently, right? So can recommend, hey, this is this argument that we have, and we want to go ahead and I think this is the next step we should do, Your Honor. So yeah, I don't think it'll really have a huge impact on litigation stuff,
Mhm.
transactional drafting contracts that could go ahead and lower the prices, right, that consumers are paying for that kind of work. Hopefully, it will go ahead and lower the prices that consumers are paying for litigation, for lawsuits, right? If as we as attorneys can cut down some of the time in drafting.
So you're just passing those savings on,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, we would want to go ahead and pass those savings on 100%. Yeah. I think litigation is overly expensive as it is. There's a bunch of opportunities, I think, that we could invoke new rules and to maybe speed things up. But for now, yeah, hopefully.
Nice. All right, Mark, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so we have our website, gomezlawla.com. So Gomez with a Z, LAW, LA.com. Check us out on our website. And then if you do want a free consultation, our attorneys are always available. Some of our consultations are with non-attorneys, but they've been talking and dealing with these areas for a long time. But yeah, we offer a free 30-minute consultation, and I highly recommend if you have any questions about your contract or the deal that you're entering into, just talk to a couple of attorneys and get our feedback. Our number to talk to our office is 855-219-3333. So yeah.
Perfect. Easy enough.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening or watching, and I'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to The Key to the City of Angels. I hope you found today's episode helpful as you navigate the world of Los Angeles real estate. Whether you're looking to buy your first home, expand your investment portfolio, or sell in this competitive market, I'm here to help you succeed. Let's connect. Visit my website or follow me on social media to learn more about how I can help you achieve your real estate goals. And if you're ready to take the next step, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to work with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit. Together, let's unlock your potential and make your real estate dreams a reality.